Charlie Bartlett is a young, rich kid who is forced out of a private school and into going to a public school. There, he establishes himself as the cure-all doctor. By using his own private psychiatrist and talking to students, he's able to get multiple mental health medications and give them to students, and seemingly becoming more popular than anyone overnight. At the same time, he falls in love with this mysterious girl who can see the real Charlie, but is also dealing with her own struggles at home, dealing with the grief of losing her mother and the overbearing nature of her father, who's also the principal of her school. Charlie Bartlett, by his nature, wants to be popular by doing what he considers the right thing, with the intention of helping these kids in ways that they can't normally get help. And by sitting down and talking to them, getting them medications based off of interactions. And it raises the question, what is the harm in misdiagnosis? In the beginning, Charlie himself is dealing with issues of inadequacy. How his mother especially wants to interact with him but doesn't quite understand him enough to really know where to start. By being so isolated in his rich mansion, he's also isolated from essentially love in his world, and so is constantly trying to reach out and figure out what things he can change about himself. His mother suggests a psychiatrist to help get him medication, which proceeds him down a rabbit hole of trying different medications. Later, Charlie uses this to his advantage by talking to these students in 2 separate bathroom stalls and hiring the bully who picked on him for a price to be his bodyguard. He uses his faults as an advantage to interact with kids who struggle with the same things he does. Where he may see these things as a hindrance, others may see it as a gift. Throughout the entire film, Charlie has the best of intent for what he wants to do. He wants to help these kids, and he feels that he's the only one who is willing to do so. He's the only one who's willing to listen and talk to them and interact with them, which in itself is not a negative thing. The problem is he comes to these conclusions based off of talking to them, which is the exact same thing that his parents do to him. They jump to conclusions and subsequently have problems figuring out who these people actually are and just have their own assumptions and just go forward with those assumptions. The intention of what he wanted to do was in the right path. It's more of how he executed it that may not have been the right method. As Charlie grows more and more secretly influential to the school as the psychiatrist that most of them probably couldn't afford or couldn't talk to, he gains this power, this kind of gluttony of wanting and wanting and wanting more. And that more is influence. He gains power from their need. It slowly becomes an ego thing. No longer is he the helper. He is now the beneficiary of their need. So he takes advantage of it in the sense that, as well as his literal payment, his popularity is his payment to give them pills. He's using these people, who he believes are his friends, to get out of the shadow of himself. As the story progresses, much like all of these kinds of stories, the effects that Charlie causes spread in ways he doesn't quite understand. While he's trying to be romantically entangled with this girl, and become popular, and diagnose these kids, he's not understanding the effect that it's having on the parents. He's not understanding the effect that it's actually having on these kids in their private lives. And he's not understanding the catastrophic effect that it's having on the girl he likes' father, principal. His hardness of watching over his daughter, his subsequent care seems cold and callous, but the reason why is because he lost his wife. He's a widower, and he's still heartbroken. Not only is he a widower, though, he's a recovering alcoholic. An alcoholic who refused to be an alcoholic any longer for the betterment of his daughter. As soon as all of the events proceed, the foundation of what he was, the strong, stoic, caring father, the more he sees his daughter distancing, the more it starts affecting his personal life, his job, and at the center of it is Charlie. Much like all things under pressure, there will always be cracks in the foundation. And as he grabs the bottle, he has to break, and he breaks Charlie as well.
I think it's because you've taken everything from me. Why did you do that?
I don't
don't need you to say anything to me, and I don't need you to save me!
All right, then what am I supposed to do in this situation? I mean, I'm just a kid. I'm just a stupid kid.
Stop the presses. Run that by me again. You're a what?
I'm just a kid.
I get it. It's tough. I was a kid once, too.
Every single character in this movie all have the same exact solution. Instead of immediately coming up with an answer, to listen. The impact of someone else's pain, the impact of what they go through, are subsequently each their own. Now, solely because these experiences may not be unique, doesn't mean they're invalid. No one experience is exactly the same. No resolution is exactly the same. Many people will make the assumption of just answering, before even listening to the question, before even listening to the person. They have these assumptions, and Charlie is just as guilty as the parents are for not listening to the children in the first place. Just as guilty as the father for not listening to his daughter, thinking that he is solely dealing with the grief of losing his wife, but his daughter is also dealing with the grief of losing her mother. These pains are not wholly unique, but they are still an individual's pain to bear. And a lot of the times, it's the listening for others that becomes more and more difficult than immediately trying to fill in a blank of an answer that may not even be necessarily what the person wants in the first place. So, what is the harm in misdiagnosis? Anyone who studies medicine or studies psychology will tell you the exact same thing. Pills, medications, and recovery are all unique to the individual. One pill that could help, say, someone's depression may not be effective for one person as it would be for another, just as a certain type of food may not taste as good to one person as another. Each individual is unique in that regard. However, people have a habit of diagnosing based off of their own personal experience and trying to find an answer for that experience. While that does seem in good intent, the misdiagnosis of assuming that the problem is yours to handle prevents the person from experiencing it as a wholly unique individual and subsequently learning from that experience. Once there's a misdiagnosis, it could cause more effects and problems than the original problem that stemmed from it in the first place. But it could also find solutions to problems you don't even know. Ultimately, the solution is never simple. When it comes to understanding people, the best course of action sometimes can be not to make an action, but instead to listen and just absorb. But in the end, these aren't answers, they're hypotheticals.
It was an accident. About an hour ago, a small jet went down inside New York City. The president was on board.
President of what?
We're still at war, Pliskin. We need him alive.
I don't give a about your